Welcome back to the RevRoom podcast. Here at Inverter, we help teams build real revenue systems that actually work. Not shiny activities that look good in reports, but strategies that thrill customers and support sales. And when it comes to events, too many companies are stuck treating them like isolated lead generation machines instead of what they really are: critical relationship building touchpoints in a complex buyer journey. Your events need to do more than collect emails. They need to accelerate pipeline and create lasting community. Today, we're talking with an event expert, Andrea Rutherford, about transforming events from one-off moments to strategic movements that actually drive revenue. Let's dive in. Well, welcome everybody back to the podcast, to the RevRoom. We're so glad you're here and listening in today. Today, we're going to talk about events. And really, we're going to focus on how we are thinking about, as marketers, transforming events from one-off sort of lead generation tactics to relationship building engines that help us drive long-term revenue impact. And I'm very excited about our guest today. Andrea Rutherford is with us today. Andrea, welcome to the podcast. So glad you could be here. And
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself to the audience and let us know a little bit about you.
Well, number one, thank you so much for having me. I have been in the corporate event space for over a decade, and during that time, I've had the privilege of creating, developing, and managing a wide variety of events, from regional micro events to trade shows to large-scale conferences to incentive trips. But what's always driven me is the opportunity to bring people together. And help create seamless experiences that can spark real connection. After years in the corporate world, I decided to make the leap to step out on my own because I saw a gap in the market. So many companies needed experienced support, but didn't know where to turn. So now I get to help others bridge that gap with a focus on quality, strategy, and service.
Oh, amazing. Well, Andrea and I worked together in a previous life many years ago, as you said, doing all of the above, working on a lot of those different kinds of events together. So again, really excited to have you on the show today to talk more about how events have evolved over especially the last 5 years. But gosh, that's just exponentially getting even more complicated as we introduce AI tools and all those sorts of things. So we'll get into that a little bit. Well, as you know, Andrea, at the podcast, we like to ask our guests to bring a coffee mug, their favorite coffee mug, and tell us a little story about maybe why it's your favorite. So I know you brought one today, so I'd love to hear your story.
So this year is a milestone year for me. So I entered a new decade. So this mug is actually from my sister, but the backside is really where it comes into play. So I will read it. I came, I saw, I forgot what I was doing. I went back, I got distracted. Is this my cup? What's going on? Like, I related to it so much that I'm like, yes, in a mug form, this is me.
I love it.
So
I'm here for that. I could totally use one of those. And I'm not sure we need milestone birthdays to get there. I'm close
no,
to
that
one
is
as
true.
well, but yeah,
That is true.
That's amazing. All right. Well, let's dive into the topic of today and really about the evolution of events and what you're seeing in the space as you do this every day, in and out. And first, let's start with what's broken. So you've been in this space for a long time. So what's the biggest disconnect that you're seeing between the stakeholders, what stakeholders expect in the business and from events, and what's really actually realistic today and what's happening on the ground?
So I think the biggest thing is wanting events to be like vending machines, right? For revenue. You insert budget, you get leads. But in reality, events are more like community greenhouses, right? You plant the seeds, you nurture the relationships, and the growth simply takes time, right? So if you're only measuring by how many deals close in 30 days, you're going to always be disappointed. The real value really compounds over time. So that leads me to an example of something that happened to me. I remember, and actually, you might remember this too, a conversation that I had with a sales leader, and this was pre-pandemic. We were reviewing the previous year's sponsorship events and evaluating which ones had ROI. Unfortunately, many hadn't. So it was recommended, right, to reallocate the budget toward the events that had shown clear value and got immediate pushback. And despite the lack of measurable return on some of these events, they were seen as essential, right, because of the relationships that they nurtured. And so I think it highlights a key challenge, right? You've got to balance the data-driven decisions with the intangible value of human connection.
Mhm. Mhm.
And while it's hard to justify continued spend on events that don't show a financial return, the opportunity really lies in finding smarter ways to show up. And, perhaps that's smaller activations, strategic collaboration. It really is about just continuing that relationship building without compromising accountability.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that's where the opportunity is.
So let's talk about that just a little bit because I think that, at least in my experience, having been a demand gen leader, a marketing strategy leader, and sitting in those types of conversations, including that one with you, I do remember that conversation. But I wonder a lot of times you hear things like that, and it isn't about the relationship building. It's also, hey, we have to be there because our
Right,
competitors are there, and if we're not there, to create a bunch of buzz about what's wrong with us,
right.
things like that. But when you talk about the relationship piece of that, like, how do we measure that? Like, how, and I don't mean about ROI, but like, how do we hold the individuals going to the conference or the event accountable to the things that we've agreed to from a strategy perspective to get the biggest bang for our buck?
Yeah. So, I found it interesting because we were viewing it, right, from the ROI perspective, which
Yeah,
isn't
from
wrong,
pipeline or leads, right?
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
But we're not there. We're not on site having those conversations and those relationships. And so, you know, it really is a balance. And I think at the end of the day, there has to be some kind of tangible metric to be able to say that it is worth the time and energy. But, we were having a conversation, it could have been a year, 6 months, 3 months since some of those things, and maybe it just hadn't given enough time to show those metrics. So
Yeah.
it really, instead of having a once a year conversation, it needs to be ongoing.
Mhm.
Right? And so you constantly have to be reviewing um, those metrics, those relationships. And I think a bigger part of that conversation is what are those relationships, right?
Mm. Yes.
Um, and being able to tie something to that so that that can be looked at and reviewed on a more consistent basis.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's not
Yeah, that
something
makes
I
a lot
would
of
have
sense.
known, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because you're sitting at the office and looking at the numbers and the data, and they're on the ground
Right,
at doing the work.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you mentioned this earlier, but, a big piece of the event side and like scrutinizing what we're doing and, trying to squeeze every bit out of everything we do is around budget. And, there are a lot of budget constraints around that, and budgets probably aren't significantly increasing for events year over year, but the expectations are. So, how are you thinking about delivering better experiences when the budget, the money, isn't growing with the costs and the expectations, in that sort of one-to-one relationship?
Yeah, it truly is a challenge. But I like to think of it more by reframing it, right? It's an
Mm,
opportunity to evaluate and rethink where and why you're spending. I think it's also important that there needs to be a collaborative conversation on the event goals and the objectives that are tied to the larger business priorities. Ensuring it's not a rinse and repeat event, which is very easy to fall into.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
you've got to take into account the changes that are happening both at a company level, but also at a customer level, right? So, yes, budgets are being constricted, but something else that I'm seeing a lot of is also lack of resources, right? So, it's really a puzzle.
Mm,
So, how do you achieve your event goals within the budget allotted? Um, you know, getting creative, rethinking all aspects, ensuring that you're not continuing to spend money on something because you've always done it. Um, I'll be honest, that's something that drives me crazy.
yes.
Um, but the most valuable thing that a team can do is to set aside time to strategize and ideate possibilities. And to me, that is something that is not done a lot because there is so much happening that you leave one event and you're on to the next one.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no time to think through those things. And so it's also really important that all members have a voice, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody has a different perspective. And especially being on site, you hear conversations that are happening. You hear things that customers are saying, right? And so everybody needs to have a voice, need to have buy-in and participation. But I think one of the other things I really kind of want to ensure is heard is that you don't always have to spend, big, large items, right?
Mhm.
Some of the more simpler things that you can do have bigger payoffs. So think about maybe layering in smaller, more personal touch points that feel unique to your attendees. And if you don't know what those are, just ask,
Mm,
right? I think sometimes we fail to ask our customers or attendees what they would like to see and experience. We just make assumptions.
sure.
Um, but it's also a chance to try something new. So I go back to me saying, um, don't continue doing things because you've always done them, right?
Mhm.
We are now entering a period where you have to think creatively and be willing to do things differently, because that's what is being wanted, especially when you're talking multi-generational attendees.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
now, as someone who doesn't like taking risks, it's hard to try something new because there is the possibility it could fail.
Yeah.
But even if it doesn't hit, you've learned something.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll never find those hidden gems that can become your biggest treasures because you didn't try, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, thinking a little bit outside of the box, um, asking your attendees what they want to see. One thing that I did one time is what I would call crowdsource lightning talks.
Oh,
So you ask attendees to, ahead of time, obviously, submit short 3 to 5 minute lessons. They get to vote on what has been submitted. And then your attendees become your content creators. And the energy in the room becomes fun and engaging, and it costs next to nothing.
yeah.
So it's little things like that when I'm talking about thinking outside the box, and also when you're talking multi-generational. There's some generations that may not love that, but there's others that will definitely dial in.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. I am curious about that generational shift that you're seeing, and like you said, when you do an event, whether that's in person or a webinar or something like that, there are different expectations across the various generations. So, give me some examples of what you're seeing. The different generations, and especially that younger generation, is sort of looking for and you know, is going to engage with,
Yeah.
at events.
So, there's definitely a generational shift in how people want to experience events. Younger attendees, so millennials, Gen Z, they do not want to sit passively in a ballroom being talked at. They want interaction, not a performance, right? They
Yeah,
want to shape the experience, not just consume it. So engagement for them would be, live polls, real-time voting, where they influence the session direction. Okay. So maybe some interactive elements, a co-creation space, hackathons have become popular, right? Live workshops. And they also want networking to be more like a social app, fast, intuitive, and interest-based. But when we're talking about the different generations, so we'll start with the boomers, right? They value structure, hierarchy, and formal recognition. If you talk Gen X, that's going to look more efficient and actionable insights. Like they want to know, how do I use this on Monday? Right?
yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yep.
Millennials, they want experiences. And they want them to be purposeful, value aligned, and authentic. And then going
Mhm.
back to our Gen Z, look, it's tech first, right? They want bite-sized formats that are inclusive and visually engaging.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
I saw this kind of happen in real time at a recent conference. One session featured a co-creation format where attendees could submit ideas via a QR code and vote live. And you could tell who Gen Z was in the room because they lit up. They were energized, vocal, and fully engaged because they were helping shape the content. Meanwhile, in another room, there was more of the traditional deep dive panel with a structured Q&A, and it was standing room only with Gen X and Boomer attendees, but they appreciated the expertise and the depth. So I think that experience really reinforces something that we all need to keep in mind, which is we have to design for multi-generational audiences. So there's got to be variety. There's got to be flexibility. There's got to be intentional options. Everyone wants to feel seen and served. And so the delivery just needs to match that mindset. And that is something that is hard for event marketers, right? That is used to providing content in one way.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work anymore.
How does that, translate to maybe not necessarily building, designing your own hosted event, but participating, let's say, in a big, association type of or, organization type of an event where you're trying to attract attention or you're hosting private functions or something like that. How are you thinking about that in designing those things for a multi-generational approach?
So, yeah, I mean, being able to um, kind of interact with all of those multi generations, you have to kind of rethink what you're bringing to the table, right?
Mhm.
And so I think just sitting down and, kind of rethinking how you approach those types of events is really important, and thinking through, um, you know, what can you do for those boomers that is
Yeah.
going to matter to them. And, ensuring that you're not leaving out Gen Z by thinking of it in one way. And so it really is a challenge
Yeah.
for those marketers to rethink those things, and going back to rinse and repeat, right? Like, it's very easy to fall in to the thought of we've been there year over year, and we're getting all of these leads. So you think, okay, we've got all these leads, so we've done our job. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leads does not equal ROI.
Right.
And
Right.
so you've got to be able to, you know, build those relationships with each of those generations, and really be able to, come to them with what they need, um, however that looks for your organization.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. So on the relationship building front, part of that is building community
Yep.
after the event. And um it's a hard thing to do. And few are doing it well. What does it look like when someone's doing that community building, beyond events, when it's working? What does that look like?
So I think, even going back to my example of, events are not vending machines, they're community greenhouses, right? So building community, um, isn't something you can manufacture with a single LinkedIn post or a post event email.
Yeah.
It's not about staying in touch, it's about fostering connection with purpose. So, yes, what does that look like? I think the biggest thing is if you have attendees that are still texting, sharing ideas, or setting up their own Zoom calls after your event without prompting from you, that's a huge win,
Yeah.
right? But there are ways in which the company can foster that. I think the biggest differentiator is you don't want a mailing list, you want a movement.
Hello.
So, when you've got to ensure that your attendees don't identify as attendees, they're a part of a cohesive group. So how do you get there? Well, I think there's a couple of different things, but it has to be not just when the event is happening. Okay, so you need to think of it in three different buckets. Before the event, um, create spaces for people to connect before they even show up, right? Um, you know, Maybe it is a dedicated LinkedIn group or a Slack group or whatever works in your organization, but have themed intros, or maybe there's a quick matchmaking survey that can pair people up for coffee chats. But the point is to create anticipation and familiarity, right? So then you get to the event. Okay. So during the event, you want to design moments for those peer to peer connections. I think one of the things that companies sometimes do is they pack their agenda so much that there's no time for that.
Yeah, of course.
I mean,
Yes.
it's go, 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 and you don't have time to even think about all the things you've been learning or be able to have those connections.
Yeah.
You've got to ensure that it's not just stage to audience, right?
Mhm.
So curated roundtables. We know from our previous life together that that was a very popular thing that was done. And so,
Yes.
something that is asked for year over year. And so, that's something that's really important. Maybe create opt-in networking tracks, not necessarily networking time that is a happy hour or whatever, but an actual session, that people can create those meaningful relationships based on their goals or their industries, what have you. So then, after the event, you want to keep that momentum going, but it needs to be light touch, meaning you don't want to inundate them with a bunch of things. You
Sure.
want it to be organic as much as possible. So this could be an Ask Me Anything session, newsletter, what have you. It could be with a featured speaker or, sharing crowdsourced resources, maybe highlighting community champions, once you have those community groups going. The key is consistency
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
relevance, not volume.
Yeah. Isn't that true for like almost everything we do in marketing is
Yes.
consistency and relevance?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay, so
you would
yeah,
be
go ahead.
surprised though how much that isn't the
Oh,
case. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? So
I do.
you just got to be cognizant of it. And I think the opportunity is that the event becomes the spark, not the endpoint.
That's a good phrase. I like that. That the event is the spark and not the end point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's shift a little bit to Andrea to virtual events and thinking more about just webinars and things, marketers are doing on a consistent and regular basis. Um, One of the things we've been hearing about from our clients and even seeing in our own marketing here at Inverta is, a lot of attendees will register. We've seen this for many years where attendees will register and they'll just wait for the link and then they can watch it on demand in their own time, which is all well and good. I do the same thing. Now we're seeing, yes, exactly. Everybody in the room, raise your
You're
hand.
right.
Anyways, and yeah, everybody's very busy, right? And I can't always commit to that time slot, and I
Yep.
I totally get that. But personally, I'm finding and what we're seeing as well just from our audiences is that not only are they not attending, they're also not watching the on demand, but they're asking for the AI either summary or the transcript so they can do their own personalized AI summary afterwards, understanding what's important for them and
Sure.
really just try to get to the nuggets that are important to them versus seeing the whole thing. How do you see marketers being able to build urgency for either live attendance or actually listening to the on demand or whatever that is, as opposed to just having that AI summary and, transcript uh, being all that they experience?
I will say this is a real and growing challenge. Um,
Mhm.
with so much content available on demand and those AI tools that can generate the near instant recaps, I do think the question is becoming, why show up? Like, and I get that, and again, I raise my hand. I do it too. But I think the truth is that people don't come for content alone.
Right.
They come for context, connection,
Mm-hmm.
and the energy of the experience. Um,
Yes.
you can learn so much from others that AI can't give you. AI can only give you bullet points.
Yeah.
It can't replicate being in the room or the spontaneous conversation that is sparked. Um, so I think the question becomes, how do you create urgency, right, for the live attendance?
Yes.
Um, and to me, it's by being intentional. You want to make there, wherever that there is, feel inclusive, interactive, and rewarding. in a way that a recap never could.
Sure. Yeah.
So what does that look like? Well, it could be a few things. If you're doing an in-person event, and you're also doing something, virtually or on demand, provide in-person perks that makes them want to be in person, whether it's the VIP meetups or speaker Q&As or the networking lounges. Um, you know, there's something to be said about your voice being heard, and being in person allows for that.
Sure.
And um, there's also the something that is becoming very popular in events is experiential moments, right? So maybe that's surprise giveaways or immersive activities or live entertainment. There's
Yeah.
a lot of things that you can do that you can't do on a slide deck, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of different things you can do, but at the end of the day, especially with the younger generation, it's all about the FOMO, fear of missing out,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
AI can't do that.
No. That's true, and I think and I would think that we would want to lean into that community side of it as
Yes,
well, and, um, so many webinars I'm sure that you attend and I attend or used to attend, I suppose, because sometimes I don't want to attend them anymore because of this very reason that I'm gonna say, and that is a lot of times it's just somebody talking to you, and
correct.
yes, I'm there to learn and potentially, like, learn something new, but if it's an opportunity to learn about something and then dig deeper into it, maybe with others, or just even be able to ask questions or listen to others ask questions as well, right? Like start
Right.
to listen and hear about use cases or like, how do I apply this in this, instance or against this challenge that I have. To me, that's much more meaningful, which I, by the way, I think is a reason why the podcast platform like this is actually so popular because one, it's, you can listen or watch whenever you want. And two, like we're talking about real things that real
Mhm.
people are facing and actually doing to go address the challenges they're facing versus some company, spitting out their solution to a,
Right.
a very generic peanut butter spread problem, right? So I don't know. For me, I would think that we would want to also foster that community. That's that FOMO part that you're sort of talking about. It's like, oh, I'm gonna miss that interaction. What if
Yeah.
somebody gives an example that doesn't show up on the AI summary?
Yeah. Well, and you're saying it perfectly is on demand is convenient,
Yeah,
but it's not community.
right.
And community is where events make a difference.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And you see the look, you see the output of, the desire for community. We've talked about it on this show with others, that desire for that face to face, that human interaction. But like there's also you see that in I mean, how about Reddit getting so popular? I was just talking about this today with a colleague of mine and that interaction, people want to hear from others
Yep.
about their experience with something whether you're a stranger or somebody I know.
Mhm.
And, the more we can foster that, I think the more successful we'll be, even with those types of, virtual experiences, not just in person.
Absolutely. And you've got to be willing to listen, not just talk, right?
Yes.
Because your attendees, your customers, they will tell you what they need if you're willing to listen. And I think a lot of times in events, we like to make assumptions
Yeah.
on what we think they want and need.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. It's funny. I was just thinking this in at this point in my career, at least. I don't know if you find this, Andrea. Maybe not because you were in this space but I've been in marketing for over 25 years, and I know that early on in my career, I really desired to go to these conferences and shows and hear from speakers and hear from the main stage and like and even go to the breakouts and hear some stuff. But I find I think and maybe I don't know, maybe I'm sharing too much, but like I feel like I don't get as much out of that today.
Correct.
Like I don't have this desire to leave my house, travel, halfway across the country, be away from my family, sit in a hotel for 4 days and kind of maybe have a good takeaway after 4 days of hotel food and whatever. And like I feel and I know that's the desire or the reason why webinars have taken off so much because people can get that. But even that is now becoming so much more flat.
Right.
And again, maybe that's just my own experience. I don't want to, reflect that on others, but I wonder if you're seeing a little bit of that, or have heard a bit about that a little bit. And then two, I think how do we, we've talked a little bit about engaging the generations, but also like, how do we've got to make things much more enticing and
Hmm.
key takeaways. Like you said, like it doesn't have to be an hour webinar. Like it could be, hey, 20 minutes and then we're going
Correct.
to, have a 5-minute Q&A and then we're done.
You know, where we are with technology now, today, our attention spans are not what they used to be. So being able to sit in a session for 50 minutes, it's too much.
Yeah.
People can't handle listening for that long of a period. Attention spans just aren't what they used to be. So, you know, going back to the Gen Z that want tech first and bite sized, I think that applies to a lot more of us than just Gen Z.
Yeah.
And how do you balance that, right? So there are some companies out there that their conferences or webinars are, credit based, right? Based on
Yes.
certification. So they have to be a certain length of time. You can't get away from that. But I think you have to balance the information with, interactivity, engagement instead of just being that talking head. And same goes for virtually. Like, I can't sit and just listen. I am not that person
No.
anymore.
And everybody's multitasking through it,
Uh,
right? Yeah.
Absolutely, which is why they want the bullet recap after, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I get it. I'm guilty of it as well. But that's where we are
Yeah.
today.
That's right. Well, speaking of today, let's look forward a little bit
Yes.
before we wrap up. And speaking of short attention spans, we also want to keep this tight time frame because everybody's done with their walk pretty soon
Yes.
here as they listen to us. But if you have a prediction about where event marketing is going, what should people be prepared for as we move into the next even 3 to 5 years, next decade?
So events are no longer standalone moments. They are blended ecosystems. So a mix of content, community, and experience. So you brought it up earlier about Reddit. So I'm going to talk about this blended ecosystem with some of those things in mind. So first would be think Netflix, right? Bingeable, high quality content that's accessible anytime, anywhere. Okay. Um, Part of it could be Reddit, right? Community led conversations with peer perspectives. It creates that safe, authentic space for people to ask and share and contribute. The final piece of that ecosystem would be like an Airbnb experience, curated live activations that are immersive, personal, and impossible to replicate. Again, creating that FOMO. But, having those moments that people can feel, right?
Mm.
So maybe that's a hands-on workshop, a VIP dinner, or a pop-up demo, whatever the case may be. Um, a successful event marketer will be able to orchestrate all three of those simultaneously. But it needs to feel integrated, purposeful, and audience first. So you asked, what are things that, can be done now to prepare? So
Yeah.
going back to the earlier conversation of, kind of reimagining your event calendar.
Mm.
You've got to think about your events as year-round engagement engines rather than just a series of dates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you need to be able to invest in technology. That's not a popular thing. Um, but you need to have that technology that can support the content delivery and the community conversation.
Yeah.
And then you've got to have a team that blends event strategy, community management, and experience design. I wish I could do all of those things myself, but I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
So you've got to have people that can be dedicated to those things in order to have all of those three things simultaneously and be able to build that ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we're going to invest in events, we should continue to do it well and evolve as they evolve and make that investment for the ROI we're looking for.
Absolutely, because you'll start to lose
Yeah.
attendees because they're not getting those things, right?
So,
It's no longer enough to just host an event. You've got to build a world that people want to step into and stay connected to. And that's the
mhm.
challenge.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has too. So I will in the show notes drop a link to your LinkedIn profile. So if anybody would like to connect with Andrea and ask her more questions about event marketing, I'm sure you'd be willing to engage,
Oh,
build that
absolutely. I
community.
could sit here and talk all day.
I love it. I do, and I love it too. So same. So we get along well, but
So I think
awesome.
if I'm to kind of leave the audience with something is,
Yep.
stop asking how do we get more leads and start asking how do we earn more trust.
Mhm.
And,
That's a great tip.
events are trust accelerators, and trust has become the real currency in, events and even in a buyer journey. So I just am so appreciative of you, connecting with me today and being willing to talk about these things. I think it has been a great conversation, and I love to catch up.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Andre. Appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rev Room today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. For more, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Don't forget to follow Inverta on LinkedIn for more updates and exclusive content. That's Inverta, INVERTA. Have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Reach out and let us know. Until next time, keep innovating and driving that revenue growth. See you next time.